I'm back. Quick reading. In the farthest corner from the bed, deep in the shadows, was a pile of bones. The bones of small animals. Once the candy was eaten, the outsider had been forced to hunt in order to feed itself, and without the means to light a fire, it had fed savagely on raw meat. Perhaps it kept the bones in a cave because it was afraid that by disposing of them outside, it would be leaving clues to its whereabouts. By storing them in the darkest, farthest corner of its haven, it seemed to have a civilized sense of neatness and order. But to Lem, it also seemed as if the outsider had hidden their bones in the shadows because it was ashamed of its own savagery. Most pathetically of all, a peculiar group of items was stored in a niche in the wall above the grassy bed. No, Lem decided, not just stored. The items were carefully arranged as if for display, the way an aficionado of art, glass, or ceramics of Mayan pottery might display a valuable collection. There was a round stained glass bubble of the sort that people hung from the patio covers to sparkle in the sun. It was about 4 inches in diameter, and it portrayed a blue flower against a pale yellow background. Beside that bubble was a bright copper pot that had probably once contained a plant on the same or another patio. Next to the pot were 2 things that surely had been taken from inside a house, perhaps from the same place where the outsider had stolen the candy. First, a fine porcelain study of a pair of red feathered cardinals sitting on a bench, every detail exquisitely crafted. Second, a crystal paperweight. Apparently, even within the alien breast of Yarbek's monstrosity, there was an appreciation of beauty and a desire to live, not as an animal, but as a thinking being in an ambient, at least lightly being touched by civilization. Lem felt sick at heart as he considered the lonely, tortured, self-hating, and human yet self-aware creature that Yarbek had brought into the world. Last of all, the niche above the grass bed held a 10-inch high figure of Mickey Mouse that was also a coin bank. Lem's pity swelled because he knew why the bank had appealed to the outsider. At Bannatyne, there had been experiments to determine the depth and nature of the dog's and the outsider's intelligence, to discover how close their perceptions were to those of a human being. One of the experiments had been designed to probe their ability to differentiate between fantasy and reality. On several occasions, the dog and the outsider had separately been shown a videotape that had been assembled from clips of all kinds, bits of all John Wayne movies, footage from George Lucas's Star Wars, news films, scenes from a wide variety of documents, of documentaries. Oh, docu documentary. No way. Documentaries. Okay, now documentaries. Documentaries.
Documentaries.
Documentaries.
Porcelain.
Porcelain. Yeah, I said it right. Documentaries. And old Mickey Mouse cartoons. The reactions of the dog and the outsider were filmed, and later they were quizzed to see if they understood which segments of the videotape were of real events and which were flights of the imagination. Both creatures had gradually learned to identify fantasy when they saw it, but strangely, the one fantasy they most wanted to believe in, the fantasy they clung to the longest, was Mickey Mouse. They were enthralled by Mickey's adventures with his cartoon friends. After escaping Valentine, the outsider had somehow come across the coin bank and had wanted it badly because the poor damn thing was reminded of the only pleasure it had ever known while in the lab. In the beam of Deputy Bachner's flashlight, something on the shelf glinted. It was lying nearly flat because the coin bank. It was lying nearly flat beside the coin bank, and they almost overlooked it. Cliff stepped into the grass bed and plucked the gleaming object out of the wall niche. A 3-inch by 4-inch triangular fragment of a mirror. The outsider huddled here, trying to make as much of a home for itself as was possible. Once in a while, it picked up this jagged shard from a mirror and stared at itself. Perhaps not ugly, perhaps trying to come to terms with what it was, and failing, surely failing. Dear God, Clipstone said quietly, for the same thoughts had apparently passed through his mind. The poor, miserable bastard. The outsider had possessed one additional item, a copy of People magazine. Redford was on the cover with the claw, sharpstone, or some other instrument. The outsider had cut out Redford's eyes. The magazine was rumpled and tattered, as if it had been paged through 100 times. And now Deputy Bachner handed it to them and suggested they page through it once more. On doing so, Lem saw that the eyes of every person pictured in the issue had been either scratched, cut, or crudely torn out. The thoroughness of this symbolic mutilation, not one image in the magazine had been spared, was chilling. The outsider was pathetic, yes, and it was to be pitied, but it was also to be feared. 5 victims, some gutted, some decapitated. The innocent dead must not be forgotten, not for a moment. Neither an affection for Mickey Mouse nor a love of beauty could excuse such slaughter. But Jesus, the creature had been given sufficient intelligence to grasp the importance and the benefits of civilization, to long for acceptance and a meaningful existence. Yet a fierce lust for violence, a killing instinct second to none in nature, was also engineered into it because it was meant to be a smart killer on a long, invisible leash, a living machine of war. No matter how long it existed in peaceful solitude in its canyon cave, no matter how many days or weeks it resisted its own violent urges, it could not change what it was. The pressure would build within it until it can no longer contain itself, until the slaughter of small animals will not provide enough psychological relief, and then it would seek larger and more interesting prey. Alright, that'll be enough for my reading today. I know it's short. That's okay. But a quick recap of what I read. The NSA agents are still looking through the outsider's little home, and they found a magazine that the outsider had teared every person's eyes on that magazine and did not spare anyone. And it's sad because it's really that insecure. It really hates itself. But like Cliff said, I don't know if it was Cliff, but that's no excuse to be slaughtering people. It was made to be smart, to be honest, so still no excuse to be going around and killing people because you look ragged, because you're chopped. It's no excuse to kill people. But yeah, that's a little bit of my reading.